folks that the Zoom PowerPoint thing is a little played out and it's a little bit much. So trying to dial that back a bit.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you for being here. I'll go ahead and introduce myself and then I'll let everybody else introduce themselves. We'll call on names. Hi, my name is Tanya. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'll pass it on to Annette.
Hi, my name is Annette. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm the program coordinator here in the IC. And I will pass it on to Mariah.
Hi, my name is Mariah. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm lead support at the Intercultural Center.
Who do you pick for next?
Lisiana.
Hi, my name is Luciana. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be a mentor soon.
Who do you pick?
Sorry. Magali? Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right.
Magali?
Hi, my name is Magali. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an ICPN at the Intercultural Center. I'll pass it on to Bern.
Bern can't put their they can't do audio. Maybe put your name and pronouns on the chat. Maripaz?
Hi, my name is Maripaz. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a peer navigator at the Intercultural Center.
And Ben, you're the last one.
Awesome, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Ben Reed. I'm the Title IX and ADA coordinator on campus. I use he, him pronouns. But my title includes 2 laws. that is my title. So I'm gonna really quickly just give you an idea of what I do on campus. Hi, Bern. Thanks for typing that into the chat. I appreciate it. I also love having names and pronouns as Zoom names, which you all do by default. I think that's awesome. So my job here on campus, I kind of have 2 jobs. I'm the ADA coordinator, which is the Americans with Disability Act. For those of you who know or work with Access and Disability Services and Carrie Halferty in that office, she helps students connect to accommodations in the classroom. I do that job, but for staff. So make sure staff have access to accommodations that they need to be successful on campus, help arrange whatever that looks like for them. I do a lot of sit-stand desks. That's very popular and I think something that a lot of folks really benefit from. And then my other job, and the reason that I am here talking to you all today, is that I'm the Title IX coordinator, which means I am the person that receives and works with folks who are making reports of sexual misconduct or sexual assault on our campus. Whether or not those events happened on our campus, people can come talk to me about them, and I can help connect folks to resources, as well as do investigations into alleged misconduct on our campus when that is appropriate. So we do that a fair amount, not any more than is reasonable for a college, but we do make sure that we're holding our community accountable in those areas. So any questions for me before we kind of get going here? And then I'll give you a really clear roadmap of what we're going to talk about, as well as set just a couple like ground rules, so that way you all know before we get going. But I want to field questions and all that good stuff before I do that, just in case. Okay. I have taught a fair amount, which means I am super comfortable with like really prolonged silences. So just know there might be times when I like ask for questions and things that I'm quiet for just like an absurdly long time. That's because I want to make sure people have time to think, and make sure that you've got time to formulate the question the way you want to formulate it. So I'm not like demanding questions. I'm just giving you plenty of time to, if folks like me, I really benefit from making sure I get my question right the first time. So I try to extend that same benefit to you all. Great. So today we're going to talk about a couple different things. Tanya asked me to come in to present to you all on these topics. And given that you're employees of the college, this is important stuff for you all to know. The first kind of half, it will actually be slightly less than half of our 2 hours together today. I'm going to be talking about just Title IX as a law and how it's implemented on our campus. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I love context. My undergraduate degree is in history with a minor in geology. So like, I really like old stuff and finding out how things got to be the way they are. It's something that I find super interesting and super helpful to understanding kind of where we are now. And so I'm going to talk about the laws a little bit. It might be a little bit dry, especially if you're not super duper into the law stuff, but I won't stick there too long, I promise. Just enough so you all know the laws and kind of how they came to be, and then how those laws translate into policy and practice on our campus and where you kind of fit into that puzzle as employees of the college. And then we're going to take a break. And then we're going to talk about supporting people in a crisis. You all work, especially in the Intercultural Center, in a space where people come to feel comfortable sharing their life and what's going on with them. And sometimes that can include telling stories that are really raw and really real. And so we're going to talk about some basic techniques that apply pretty universally to whenever somebody's in a crisis and just needs support. The reason I really like doing this training, and I'm really glad Tanya asked for this one, is just because it's super useful. Like, I know I told you as Title IX coordinator, I deal a lot with like sexual misconduct, but like this is useful all over the place. It's not just useful for folks who are survivors of sexual misconduct. So it's going to be super useful training. At least that's my hope for you all. Hopefully we get some time to practice some scenarios as well right at the end to give you a chance to kind of stretch some of that learning. Couple quick ground rules. Because of the nature of my job, I do occasionally talk about sexual misconduct and sexual assault throughout the course of this training. That being said, I never do it any more specifically than I already have. So by that, what I mean is you might hear me say, if a student comes to you and discloses that they've like been assaulted, these are the steps you need to take. I'm never going to get any more detailed than that. The reason for that is because I have found, and we know this in our work, that in any room where there are more than 5 people, there is a good chance that one person in that room is a survivor of sexual assault or is directly related to a survivor of sexual assault. And so I have found in my work that being super like nitty gritty with the details usually only serves to make people uncomfortable because it's a reflection of many of their own experiences. So we're not going to do that today. We're going to talk about things pretty abstractly. And that's mostly so that way you can focus on the concepts that I'm presenting and not worried about the details too much. That being said, just because I don't get super specific doesn't mean this isn't still a tough topic to hear about and to talk about. So I am super supportive. If you all want to rock this whole training with your cameras off and on mute, I am totally fine with that. If you need to step away from your computers and just go do something else for a minute, please feel free to do that. Whatever is going to feel most comfortable to you is what's important to me, because we know that for these types of trainings, really pushing people to be uncomfortable kind of defeats the purpose of the training. And it really only creates an environment where people feel a lot of tension and can't focus on the main concepts being presented. So we're not going to do that today. It's not to say that there aren't important trainings and moments where people need to be uncomfortable, but that's not my goal today. So whatever is going to make you feel the most successful is where we're going to focus. Okay, any kind of questions about the roadmap of what we're going to learn about today, or any of kind of the kind of self-care and ground rules stuff before we get jumping in? Okay. The other thing I'll say is please do feel free to make use of the chat. If you've got questions that pop up as I'm talking, you can just unmute and ask them. But if that doesn't feel comfortable, or you want to just pop it in the chat instead for any reason at all, please feel free to do that. One of the big benefits of ditching the whole PowerPoint Zoom thing is it's much easier for me to see the chat. I've done lots of these presentations where there's the PowerPoint taking over the screen, and the chat is, I only, it's kind of tough. So Anyway, long story short, you'll be able to pop stuff in the chat if you need to. And then we can go ahead and jump in to the bits about the laws. Okay, so this is the potentially dry stuff, but I do promise it's important to understanding kind of the bigger context. I also hope I can present it with a little bit of a critical lens, because I think some of the laws and how they came into being tell a story about higher education that I think is important to hear, especially kind of working for a college. And it's not one that's super favorable to higher education. So I think it's an important story to hear. So right off the bat, Title IX often gets talked about on colleges kind of as a singular thing, but really it's a combination of three separate laws. And so we're going to talk about all three briefly. The first is Title IX as part of the Higher Education Act. So there's your first one. That makes sense. Because it was the first one, that's why the other laws kind of get lumped in under it as an umbrella term. The second is the Violence Against Women Act, which we're going to talk about briefly. And then the last is the Clery Act. All three of those laws have very specific rules about how colleges treat sexual misconduct on their campus. So all three of those have specific requirements. But because Title IX came first, generally speaking, most colleges, including ours, kind of lump everything else under the Title IX umbrella. So we're going to talk about those three laws real quick, and then we'll talk about how things have changed recently for Title IX. So if you've been keeping an eye on the news, there's been some stuff over the past couple of years, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So let's talk about Title IX first. So Title IX, part of the Higher Education Act passed in the 1970s. Title IX itself is actually a really short law. It's only 36 words. So it's super short. And essentially all that law did was say that colleges needed to offer similar educational experience, could not limit educational experience based on sex. Do note, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, the history of Title IX is one that really did view gender and sex in the binary. It did not take a very nuanced view until fairly recently on that. And so I'm going to talk about this law in the terms that it was when it was passed in the 70s, which really just focused on men and women and was not more broadly inclusive than that. So that has changed, thankfully, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I do want to put a pin in that, but do know when it was passed, it was really focused on the binary. And so when it was passed, it was just equal opportunities for men and women was the goal. And really the emphasis for this was on sports as well as academic programs. So the idea was no college should restrict access to an academic program just based on sex, and schools needed to provide similar athletic opportunities for students based on sex. And so the first bit, the academic programs, was a pretty quick turnaround for a lot of colleges. Any programs that had an admissions quota or requirement, including sex, they axed those, they got rid of them and opened it up to everybody. Whether or not that actually made those spaces inclusive is a very different conversation, but they at least got rid of the requirement. The really sticky point for a lot of colleges was the athletics piece, because huge, especially giant state schools with big football programs, really struggled to come to terms with the idea that they needed to provide similar athletic opportunities for women. And what that has evolved to on most campuses is making sure that there are women's teams that are as well funded in terms of scholarships as football programs. It's really just about scholarships, because a lot of colleges have kind of found loopholes around Title IX in terms of like stadiums and things like that. If you go down to UW, Husky Stadium is massive, and there is no similar facility for women's sports teams. There just isn't. And UW will tell you that that's okay because they had a donor give money in order to build that stadium. It's a loophole, and one that a lot of colleges use that hasn't really been decided in the courts or in any legal proceedings after that. But schools really do need to provide similar scholarship opportunities for athletes. And a lot of schools have come a long way on that in the past 40 years. Some schools still haven't quite gotten there yet, and they do occasionally get found in violation of Title IX as they work towards those things. So that's Title IX. Similar opportunities for men and women on a college campus. That's the catchphrase. The next law, which was not passed until the 90s, was the Violence Against Women Act. And this law is a really big deal for a lot of reasons, but most notably, it was the first federal law that defined domestic violence as a crime. Up until the 90s, domestic violence was left to the purview of the states, which meant it was really state dependent as to whether or not domestic violence was even considered a crime at all, let alone what was defined as domestic violence. So it's pretty shocking. There's a really a great podcast. It's a single episode called Everybody Knows Somebody that really talks about this a lot. But I think it's important to understand that this was a huge shakeup, and a lot of states were pretty angry about this and felt that the Violence Against Women Act was an overstretch of federal power. Still stands today, although it does have to be renewed periodically, and sometimes it can be a bit of a sticking point up and through as recently as 2020. It took a while to get renewed again. So it's an interesting act that sits very noticeably as a continuing battle 30 years later in kind of the American political landscape. The way that the Violence Against the Women Act impacts colleges is that as part of the act, it required colleges to offer training to students and require training of staff related to topics of domestic violence and sexual assault. So that's part of why I'm here today, to talk to you about that training. Your staff, you're required to take some form of training. So that's why I'm here. But also, it required colleges to be taking a fairly proactive approach in trying to limit sexual misconduct, which I'm going to use for a really big, broad umbrella. It includes sexual assault, it includes stalking, it includes dating violence, it includes domestic violence. To be proactive in trying to limit sexual misconduct on their campuses. Frankly, a lot of campuses really struggle with this, including ours. Until recently, we didn't have a universal training that we offered students. This fall was the first time that we sent something out to student emails as an online training, which is super imperfect. It's not something I love doing. And it's something a lot of colleges are really grappling with, that requirement, even though, again, we're 30 years later. So it's one that's a bit tough, and something that because it requires such nuance, because it's so culturally dependent, because there's a lot of active discussion, and a lot of what is being talked about in those circles looks really differently than it did in the 90s. And there's just a lot of growing that a lot of colleges need to do there. So that's the Violence Against Women Act. And so it joined Title IX. Title IX said, you need to open your college, you need to make it equally available to both sexes. The Violence Against Women Act said, not only do you need to make it openly available to both sexes, but you need to also be trying to limit sexual misconduct on your campus, including sexual harassment. And that was a big deal, because when Title IX first passed, it didn't require colleges to do any training or really much support for women in programs that they were subjected to harassment in. In theory, the colleges were supposed to step in and do something, but there wasn't really a law on the books that said so. And so the Violence Against Women Act also supported that as well, by bolstering the requirement for colleges to investigate sexual harassment claims in their own on their own campus. So that was a really important change to how colleges kind of did business. And then the third law that was passed that kind of gets housed under the Title IX umbrella is the Clery Act. Clery Act was passed after a student, Janine Clery, was assaulted and killed in her dorm, which was super tragic. This was, again, the 90s when this happened. And kind of what came out after that was her parents were unsurprisingly devastated and started doing some research. One of the reasons that she went to the college she went to is because her parents felt it was a very safe choice. They had made safety a key component of their college decision, and had looked up the college had advertising saying they were safe. The college talked about how there were no crimes committed on their campus and yada, yada, yada. And after their daughter was killed, they did some digging and found out that what the college had actually been doing was having the police report the crimes as happening off campus. So that way the college could say there aren't crimes happening on our campus, but if you look at the crime reports from across the street, it looked really bad. but the college could say all these things in their materials about how there was no crime happening on their campus whatsoever. So the Clery Act was really kind of a consumer protection act at the end of the day, and it requires colleges to report the numbers of crimes that are reported on their campus, including domestic violence, sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. So that was, again, another shift, because prior to this, colleges were required to make things equal, required to provide trainings, required to investigate things, but really like keeping track of what their numbers were or taking a long view of what the culture on their campus was like in regards to these topics wasn't super duper important. So that's when the Clery Act came in and said, no, you need to be tracking your numbers and you need to make those numbers public. And that is super important, especially for you all, as you are kind of thinking, for those of you who are students or might be thinking about, transferring or want to look up Whatcom's numbers. If you Google any school's name followed by Clery Act, which is CLERY, they have to file a report every year that gives the crime statistics for the previous 3 years. So you can always look up kind of what each campus is dealing with and any trends that are happening on a campus. And so that really forced campuses to suddenly go, okay, we can't just band-aid these problems. We can't just, hope that they're going to go away. We need to be more actively involved in trying to limit the impact of sexual misconduct on our campuses. And so that's kind of where we are today. There's been some big changes recently. Title IX and the enforcement of all three of these laws falls under the Department of Education, at least for colleges. VAWA also is a Department of Justice thing, but we don't need to worry about that for the purposes of today. So Title IX enforcement has always fallen under the Department of Education to hold colleges accountable. Last summer, right as we were going into lockdown for COVID, the Department of Education under Betsy DeVos totally changed Title IX. They issued a bunch of new rules about what it looked like, including requiring a live hearing for cases of sexual assault where survivors were expected to sit in the same room as their alleged attackers and be subjected to questions from their alleged attackers. Super gross, not a fan of it. And included in that was removing LGBTQ plus identities from Title IX protections, which had been instituted under President Obama. Really, really ugly. So that was the way things were until January of 2021. Biden administration came in, immediately reinstated protections for LGBTQ folks. Those never lapsed on our campus. Our policy was always to support LGBTQ folks. It's also worth noting that Washington state law requires colleges to protect the rights of LGBTQ plus folks. So it's worth noting that our campus would have supported it anyway, but it is also a state law. So there were kind of layers of protection for those identities present there. And so the Title IX does include sexuality as well as a gender identity in as its understanding of identities that can be subjected to sexual harassment. Not ideal for terms. Gender harassment is unfortunately not a term that shows up in Title IX law. So even though that might be potentially a more accurate description of some of the behaviors that we see, the law doesn't. It's not a legal term that is used, so the law doesn't use it, which is unfortunate. I know there's some folks out there advocating to see that implemented, but for now, it gets housed under the super huge sexual harassment umbrella. So some of those definitions and things changed quite quickly. However, some of the rules that the Trump Department of Education instituted were done so through a process called rulemaking, which means we're kind of stuck with them for a little bit. And that includes the live hearing component that colleges are required to do. If you want to know more about this, I can talk at length if folks have questions. But the current Department of Education has started the rulemaking process again, which means they're likely to get rid of that live hearing and some of the other changes that were made that were a little bit gross. But unfortunately, anytime they do rulemaking, they have to take at least 365 days. It's required by law. So that means we are at least 1 year out. They have asked for public comment, so we're at least 1 year out of those changes being made. So yeah, despite these being laws that were passed, in the 90s at the newest, they are actively being discussed and actively politicized in the educational landscape. Title IX and VAWA and Clery also apply to K-12 schools. They apply really pretty universally into the educational landscape. So they really are a big deal and impact a lot of people. And so that's a bunch of context, I know, but what questions do folks have about all that context, all the laws and the recent changes and the changes back and all those things? Is there stuff I can clarify? I know I fly through this bit a million miles a minute because I also know not everybody loves talking about these laws in the way that I do, and that's okay. Okay. Not hearing or seeing any. If something comes up, or if I'm forging ahead, but you do have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat if that is easiest for you. Okay, so besides the training and learning about the laws a little bit today, there's one other piece that's super important for your job. And that is the fact that you are under some of the guidance issued by the Department of Education merely by being an employee. Oh, perfect. Did you say to check Clery? So no G, I'll type that for you. There you go. So it's the Clery Act. So any college and then Clery report should show up their yearly crime statistics. So the last bit, merely by being an employee of the college, you are a responsible employee. This is a term that the Department of Education has issued. And essentially what this means is if a student comes to you or potentially another staff member, we can get into some of the nuance there. But if a student comes to you and says that they have experienced sexual assault on our campus, then that's something you need to tell your supervisor about. By law, essentially, and by college policy. I've got a couple things to unpack in that because it seems like a pretty easy requirement until you start to think about it a little bit more. The first is that you need to tell your supervisor, or you need to tell me if you don't feel comfortable telling your supervisor for any reason. And it could be a completely harmless and innocent reason, but sometimes it's just not comfortable to tell your supervisor, and that's fine. So a couple things to unpack there. The first is that the responsible employee says, the policy says that you need to tell somebody this when a person is coming to you as a college employee. Lots of you might have friends who are currently enrolled in classes at Whatcom that you have known since years ago, or even more recently, but have met them outside of the context of Whatcom. And if that's the case and they tell you about something as a friend and you have an established relationship, you don't have to report that if you don't want to. You could offer to help that person, say, hey, I know that there's some folks on our campus that would connect you to resources if you want. But again, it's about an offer. So the responsible employee policy is a little bit weird, as it kind of requires you to make a bit of a judgment call as to whether or not this person is coming to you because you are a college employee, in which case you must report, or they're coming to you for some other reason that you have known them previously, or some other reason that is not because of your job here at the college. It's a really kind of weird tightrope. And unfortunately, it's kind of up to you to make that call. For my money, always err on the side of caution and make the report. And I'll talk about what happens when you make a report in just a second. But the reason I want you to err on the side of caution and make the report is because we want to be able to bring all of our resources to somebody whenever we can. And if I don't know that something has happened to somebody, I can't do anything to help support them. Some of the stuff that I can help people with is like, oh, there's a cat that really likes to come harass my dog at the sliding glass door down here. So that's what that was. She gets a kick out of it. The cat will just sit there and the dog will bark. The 60-pound dog and this like 7-pound cat, but the dog's behind glass and the cat does not care. So hopefully it won't go on for too long. Where was I? So you kind of, I don't remember where I was at all. I was holding a finger, so I know I was making one of 2 points. Goodness gracious. Okay, we're gonna drop it and we're not gonna sweat it too much. If you have questions, or if somebody remembers where I was, that would be lovely. This is one of the pains of not doing PowerPoint.
I think you were talking about erring on the side of caution.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. To just report it to your supervisor, report it to me, because we can help people with resources. I can help folks get delays on assignments. I can help people, have flexible attendance in their classes while they get the services and support that they need. I can do a lot of things that otherwise are very difficult for students, and they have to arrange them individually with their instructors, which can really be kind of re-traumatizing to have to go through that. Whereas I can kind of do that all at once for them and send out a letter. It doesn't go into details. It doesn't share any more personal information than is necessary with the instructors. But what it does do is just kind of give those students that are experiencing that a little bit of a breathing room to kind of heal and just hopefully get a little bit better. Which is no small process and something that will take much longer than any single quarter, but can be very supportive, at least in the moment. The other thing I can do is help connect people to resources in our community or our campus. I can help get them an emergency appointment with our counselors, if that is helpful. I can also help connect them with organizations like Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Services, which is just thankfully shortened to DVSAS in our community, which offers legal assistance and all that good stuff. I have contacts over there, and I'm more than happy to bring people to that space and walk in with them, so that way they're not walking in alone for the first time. So those are some of the things that I can help do if you make the report. That being said, sometimes the decision to make the report doesn't feel that cut and dry. So I'm also happy for you all and all staff members, if you want to come to me with a hypothetical in which you can give me some of the details of the case. You're not sure whether or not you have to make a report or should make a report, because making that report can feel like a violation of somebody's confidence in you and can be a difficult decision to make. I am more than happy to kind of do the, let's talk about a hypothetical and talk about the issue, so that way I can get you some answers and get them some answers before it officially becomes a report. So that way it gives you a little bit of wiggle room and a little bit of time to think and talk to the person who told you about the situation to decide what is the best course of action, if that feels better to you all. I'm happy to do that as well. Okay, so that's the mandatory reporting piece. But I think in order to know whether or not you should make a report, it's probably pretty important to know what happens after you make a report to my office, and kind of how that process looks. So when I get a report of someone who has experienced sexual misconduct, I reach out to that person and offer to talk with them. That person has the opportunity to just ignore me, and I will go away. If someone doesn't want to talk to me about their experience, I am never going to force somebody to. We in our office, and by we I mean myself, in the office, try really hard to be very trauma informed in our practice. And what that means is really giving as much power as possible to the survivor, so that way they can determine their own journey through this process. And we do as little as possible to force anyone to do anything. We try to make sure that the survivor of the traumatic incident has the opportunity to really set the tone. So I offer to talk to them, and I let them know what services I can help them connect with. Lots of folks come in and talk with me once, hear about the services, and kind of take advantage of some of them. If it is something that happened on our campus, if a faculty member did something inappropriate, if another student did something inappropriate, if they were experiencing biased language in a classroom, I asked them if they would like the school to do an investigation, or if they would like me to talk with an instructor or anything like that. Again, they have the opportunity to say yes or no. Also, they have the opportunity to change their mind. If they say no today, but then next week they decide, you know what, I actually would like you to talk to my instructor, great, happy to do that. Nothing is ever super duper set in stone. So really try very hard to meet the needs of the person that is most impacted by the behavior. The other thing we do, and this is something folks take advantage of, is we offer a full investigation service where we do, if the behavior looks like it has violated our policy, like it has risen to the level of true policy violation, we hire an outside party to come in and run an investigation. They interview witnesses, They talk to the folks involved, and then they give us a report very clearly stating whether or not somebody has violated a policy. And at that point, if it was a student who's violated the policy, they're referred to student conduct in order to receive a sanction, which could include being asked to leave campus. It doesn't always go to that extreme, but it can. And if it was an employee who violated the policy, that referral goes to human resources, and that can include dismissal from employment. Again, it doesn't always go to that, but we really do run the gambit from trainings and mentorship and kind of educational stuff as a result of the investigation, all the way out to if the behavior is severe and impactful, and it's something that the survivor wants, removal from our campus. So we really do kind of run the gambit as a result of those investigations. So the report that you all give your supervisor, all that does is really tell me some information about the person that I'm going to reach out to and let that person decide how the college responds. There is one exception to that. If in the report we learn that there is an immediate threat to physical safety, so like if someone as part of that report is threatening to cause harm on our campus, the college can step in and still take preventative actions to stop that immediate harm from happening, even if that's not something the survivor explicitly asks for. And I think that's something that intuitively makes a lot of sense, right? If we have somebody who is threatening to come to campus and cause harm, we need to do something about that quickly, even if the survivor wants to take time to think about what they want the college to do. So there is an exception to that rule, but that's it. Other than that, it really is completely up to the impacted person on how the college moves forward. And they can change their mind. There is no statute of limitations. If somebody experienced something on our campus 10 years ago, they can come back and still file a report, and we can still take action on that. So it really, really is meant to be an empowering space and an opportunity for us to seek clarity on the events, and not, it's really intended to be a space that holds the campus and our community accountable for really what we want our shared ideals to be, which is a place free of harassment for everybody. Yeah, and so that's kind of how our campus, in addition to trainings, kind of incorporates Title IX into our work. We ask employees to tell us about stuff that's going on, so that way we can connect with survivors, get them connected to resources, whether they're the resources on our campus or the resources in our community. And then we offer those investigations as a way of holding our campus accountable when there is an issue. And there are issues, they crop up every year. I won't try to say that we're a campus that doesn't experience them. Everything from faculty making inappropriate comments to students having really unfortunate encounters with other students. All of the above happen on our campus. As much as we wish they didn't, and as much as we try to take steps to prevent them, when they happen, we want to know, so that way we can step in and prevent additional harm from happening. Oof. Okay, that's the first bit. You survived the laws and how we live them on our campus. What questions do folks have? Again, feel free to use the chat or unmute, whatever works for you. Oh, yes. Yes. Contact information. The best way to reach me is email, which I'm going to put into the chat here. The best way to reach me is email. I'm happy to set up a phone call or Zoom appointment after that. The reason I always suggest email is because my calendar is a little bit wonky. I have a 16-month-old, and so I am often juggling work and kiddo and all that good stuff. And so my calendar can be a little bit weird, but so I like to set appointments when I can. I can do same day appointments, but I just like to do that a little bit in advance, so that way folks, I can make sure that I am entering that space with folks in an environment free from distractions, except, the occasional cat harassing my dog. But, besides that, I can try to enter that space where I can show up completely for that person. So I do recommend email. You can also call me, and I'll put my phone number in the chat, but it is a campus phone number, which means it's only good during the week. Those do get forwarded to my computer, so I can, if I'm working from home like I am today, spoiler alert, my office doesn't have a washer and dryer in it, but my house does. You can also give me a call if that is more comfortable for you as well. Any other questions? Okay, tell you what, so we're going to take a quick break. I think 10 minutes should be good. Come back at 11:50, and then we're going to talk about kind of supporting people when they're in crisis. If questions pop up for you in that 10 minutes, we'll open at 11:50 with just a little bit more time for questions, just in case stuff pops up for folks. But for now, bio break, get water, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do, take 10 minutes. Also, if you want to eat, lots of you have cameras off anyway. I would never know. So please feel free to eat. I recognize that it is approaching lunchtime for lots of folks. So please feel free to do so if that is what you need to do. And I'll see everybody at 11:50.